In 1987, the world of video games was exploding as Nintendo and Sega began the beginning of the console wars. The year 1987 is significant as this was also the emergence of the classic RPG franchises. Nintendo scored big with their hits from Square and Enix, namely Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior. Both games showed players a world in which they became the characters, and they grew with the characters through vanquishing enemies, leveling their skills and armor, and of course rescuing princesses. Each game was placed in a fantasy element, with castles, kings, and magic, but none of these games really took on a different genre. None of these games placed a female in the role as the hero of the journey, and while Final Fantasy blended its fair share of Norse and Asian mythology, neither game used heavy use of Greek myth, until Sega released Phantasy Star in September of 1987. The world of Phantasy Star takes place in our own backyard. Well, not quite, but it does take place in the Alol star system, which does exist in our own galaxy, but it is not comprised of the 3 planets known in Phantasy Star 1. At the beginning of Phantasy Star, space travel is a relatively new thing, and as such only 3 planets have been explored and slowly colonized over the short 200 years. Palma is the Earth of the Alol star system, and resembles it through forests and mountains. Matavia is a world made up of sand and borrows many elements from Tatooine and Dune, including a Jawa-like creature and sandworms. Dazorus is the ice planet, a world populated by funny blue men whose speech resembles French Canadians. These native Dazorians have a special torch they light every generation during an eclipse that occurs for 10 days. His galaxy is ruled by a man named Lassic, who a century ago was given a special armor by a new religious order of priests which corrupted him. His tyranny has not only caused a mass poverty throughout the galaxy, but has also caused a rebellion whose leader Nero died in the cause, promoting Alice, his sister, to take up the cause instead. Her path leads to the talking muskrat Meow and his traveling companion, the strong and brave Odin. Farther down the road, the group acquires Noah and Esper, or a being with strong magical powers. Together, Alice and her 3 male companions journey across the galaxy in an attempt to destroy Lassic and restore peace. The battles in Phantasy Star are front-facing, meaning we do not actually see our own characters participating, but rather it's first person. While many detract from this sort of battle setup for the more flowing Final Fantasy side-view battles, these battles do not disappoint. Each weapon the character equips has a different attack graphic, and every single enemy moves during their attack. My personal favorite are the zombies and ghouls. Ooh, that's nasty! Magic also has its own graphic, and while the battles are primitive, their difficulties make up for the otherwise simple task. Each battle becomes an event during the later stages of the game, and during the final dungeon you will need a ton of healing items in order to make it to the end. These are not simple monsters. This game is incredibly tough. A major step in a different direction, and what probably put Phantasy Star on the map in the first place, is the inclusion of first-person dungeons. Phantasy Star would never return to this style. Personally, I liked it. In other RPGs where you have a top-view dungeon, it's kind of easy to see where you're supposed to go. But in Phantasy Star, it required you to get out a piece of graph paper and trace where you were going. This is back in the day when RPGs required you to think a little and use a bit more imagination. Not everything would be spelled out for you, and this was another instance of the creators telling you this game is not easy. I will admit, however, that after the first 10 dungeons, the format can get repetitious and time-consuming. However, the replayability is there, and it makes the game even more challenging and admittedly more frustrating getting stuck in the bottom of a dungeon with no MP and having to fight your way out. In other RPGs of this time period, many of the townspeople will say completely random things that have absolutely no merit. That is not the case with Phantasy Star. Townspeople in Phantasy Star are your ticket to understanding where to go next, or possibly what to remember in the future. Many things said early in the game allude to events that will take place some 20 hours later. These conversations are not idle chit-chat, but deal directly with things that you acquire but don't quite understand. One such conversation deals with the prism, which explains that it shows unseen worlds, but does not tell you where or when to use the prism. Only when you reach the second to last dungeon and an open blue sky presents itself do you get the urge to even use the prism. While many would claim this is unfair or misleading, I find it to be very ingenious. The game does not want this to be easy. This is a huge undertaking and a very big quest. For those who wish to play the game but cannot take the time to think and in the end feel rewarded for beating it, GameFAQs always has your back. Another innovation of Phantasy Star was the inclusion of futuristic vehicles. The first vehicle is the Land Rover, which does exactly as its name would suggest. It goes nearly 3 times the speed of a character's normal walking pace, but with the same rate of random encounters, allowing a faster movement. Plus, it could travel over harmful terrain such as these ant lions without instigating a battle. The second vehicle is the Hovercraft, which is important for its use of crossing water and in certain areas for crossing lava. The third vehicle, and my favorite, is the Ice Digger. While its use is only limited to Dozoris, its function is incredible. The vehicle plows through certain mountains, leaving the player exposed to new areas, which are necessary for furthering the story. I just find such satisfaction in knowing I'm leveling mountains to the ground with a rotating mobile ice pick. I mentioned briefly the use of Greek mythology, but perhaps now is a good time to explain a bit more about this. In the original Phantasy Star, the game talks a great deal about Perseus and Medusa. For those who don't know, Perseus was a Greek myth hero who killed an ancient monster, Medusa, who had snake for hair and eyes that could turn you to stone. What makes this interesting is that the Alol star system actually sits in the constellation of Perseus. Medusa has been reborn in this world, and the same shield used by Perseus is later acquired by Odin in order to kill her again. Besides all this, Alice's brother Nero shares the same name of a Roman emperor. Phantasy Star might not be a perfect game, though for its time it was incredibly original. Each element is unique to itself, from the first-person dungeons to the battle system and the traveling between different worlds. Many claim that it is stuck in its time, however, that it cannot recover from the depths of 1987, that it's too aged and too forgotten, too old for modern gamers to grasp. While a remake has been made that I own, it was only released in Japan, and the translation makes the game difficult to play, and even more difficult since new story elements have been added to reflect the later installments of the game and the developing storyline. Phantasy Star for the Sega Master System and for its time is still a great adventure for those die-hard RPG fans who desire a greater challenge. But this is only part one of a much larger story. Much of the following that I'm about to say is based upon fan fiction and the later series to flesh out some of the story. While I will not give it in full, the following is vital information to understanding the remainder of the series. Allow me to recap, but for those who wish to play the game for themselves, now would be a good time to just stop the video. In the beginning, Alice and Nero were children of the former king of the Alol star system, the Landels. Either during the events of colonization or an encounter with the dark priests of this new religion, the king and queen were killed, but not before King Landel appointed Lassic to take charge. Tajim, an old Esper who trained Noah in the ways of Esperism, kept close watch of the children and gave them to a Pullman family for adoption. The children grew, but Lassic became corrupted and put the entire galaxy in his dominion. Fearing the power of a rebellion, he stored away a few varied items made of Laconia, the strongest material, and magically detached his castle into the sky, making it invisible to the naked eye. Alice finds Nero on the brink of death after being beaten by the robot cops of Lassic. She avenges Nero and finds Meow, who has been sold as a pet. Meow explains to Alice that they must find Odin, who is turned to stone by Medusa, but the bottle hanging around Meow's neck will unthaw Odin. Following this advice, they free Odin and visit the mayor of Matavia. During this trip, however, they fall into a restless sleep in which they battle a demon known as Succubus and are defeated. After awakening, they travel to find Noah, who joins them. During the course of their adventures, Odin takes his revenge on Medusa, and the remainder of the Laconian items are found, as well as a nut from the ancient Laconian tree, a crystal said to weaken Lassig's powers, and an arrow prism which can reveal Lassig's sky castle. After journeying to the top of Lassig's old mansion, they raise the arrow prism to the sky, revealing Lassig's sky castle. Meow partakes of the Laconian nut, which transforms him into a creature with magnificent wings. The party gathers on Meow's back, but is confronted by a gold dragon sent by Lassig. After defeating him and making their way to the top of the sky castle, they succeed in destroying Lassig and ending his reign of terror. Content with their mission, they return to the mayor of Batavia, only to find that he is gone. Moments after discovering him missing, they fall into a dungeon and continually dropping until they reach a mysterious demon known as Dark Falls. The battle rages on, with similarities to the dream the party had previously. After his defeat, however, the party returns to find the mayor dazed. He explains that he was possessed both body and soul by something evil, and that Alice and her party saved the world just in the nick of time. He also recalls that Alice is the rightful heir of the throne, and she ascends as the credits roll.